What? In fact, Jim Keithley back inside the Indoor Golf Studio once again. Thanks for all the questions that continue to come in. We've had several questions relative to the fundamentals. What are the fundamentals of golf? Grip, stance, posture, ball position, and alignment. So this video is just going to encapsulate all of those into one. So let's get after it. So in the last video, I talked about we're going to just make some assumptions, and we're going to assume that everyone has a great grip, good setup, good posture, good ball position, and these are terrible assumptions to make. The fundamentals of golf all start with, at least my philosophy, I try to get all of my students to be very neutral. So neutral grip, neutral setup, neutral club face, neutral path, okay? So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into these. We only have two touch points in golf, our hands to the grip and our feet to the ground. Let's start with hands to the grip, okay? Without a proper grip, without a functional grip, you're not going to be able to leverage the club properly. You're not going to be able to use good wrist conditions the way in which the wrists are intended to be used, and you just won't be able to make it a functional move based on a flawed grip. So there's a lot of different ways to teach a grip, and I think maybe the easiest way is let's just assume that we were going to throw a golf ball. I wouldn't put that golf ball way back in my palm, okay, and try to throw that underhanded in a fashion like this, because that would not be very efficient. Or even if we were skipping a rock, we wouldn't do that. What would we do? As an athlete, we would just put it in that finger, wedge it between the thumb, and now that gives us an athletic leveraged position, okay? If I wanted to throw that golf ball as efficiently as possible, I would do that. I wouldn't put it back in my palm deep into my fingers. So if you could just imagine how you would feel that and hold that golf ball. So notice the thumb and the forefinger, there's a pinch point there, okay? Also notice that I'm not flexed. I've got this right hand extended back, okay? And now I could just engage into this powerful wrist position, okay? If I were left-handed and I were throwing in this direction, I would do the same thing. I would work this way. I wouldn't have it back. So let's just start with the lead hand. I'm going to assume you're right-handed, and that's a terrible assumption. So I'm just going to not say left and right. I'll say lead arm. In this case, lead hand, which would be the left arm, left hand of a right-handed golfer. There's that position. If I were to take this club, that's how I would throw this golf ball. I would want to see that exact same position on the grip. So now I have this nice little cupping happening in my lead wrist. I've got the thumb offset as I look at it to the right. I do not want a hand that looks like this. I want a pinch point. I could put a T in there, and you could feel that the T would just stay together. So from this vantage point, lead hand, I want it running diagonally through my fingers. I do not want it up here. That's where most of you are gripping the club. Diagonally through the fingers, and then we're just going to take this thumb and wrap it over to the right side. So that's the look. Your trail hand, in this case for a right-handed golfer, it's the right arm, right hand. It's just going to work like a puzzle. I want the two pads fitting right into that thumb. So now we have a look. remember, if I were holding that golf ball, that's what I would look like. And that's how the hand fits on the club. So now, this would be called a neutral position. Let's talk terminology. Strong versus weak. If your lead hand is turned too much to the right, I can see too many knuckles, and that gives me the ability to close the club face. Okay, we don't want the ability to close the club face that much. We want to get the hand more on top. So now our wrist joints, sure, we can close the club, but not nearly as much. The opposite of that is if we were too much on top of the grip. This is called a weak position. Anatomically, at impact, you would go back to that position and notice what it does to the face. It opens the face. So let's just get everyone in a really nice neutral position, and that's what good hands look like on the club. Not like this, that's too strong. Not like this, that's too weak. So now that we have our hands on this club properly, and more specifically in a neutral position, that's going to allow us to hinge the club both up and down and maintain a neutral club head, and also this way and maintain a neutral or square club face. So now let's take it one step further. What do we look like when we get over a golf ball? Basic setup. Let's start with alignment. I've got two lines of reference here. This line is the ball line. That's where my ball would be. It runs infinitely forever. Right there is that line. That's my target line or ball line. Now, golf is not played with us standing on that line. We're offset to the left as a right-handed golfer, and that's where my feet, hips, shoulders, and forearms should all be placed. And we talk about parallel left. Notice this line, if they ran forever, they would never cross. So we need feet, hips, shoulders, and probably most important, forearms to all be on a straight line, parallel left of where the ball would be. So now, what's the biggest flaw that we see in golf? I usually see people aiming too far to the right, and that causes some type of compensation with a swing path flaw. So let's get them more neutral. Feet equal distance to the line, hips square to our foot line, shoulders square to our foot line. And now let's talk about forearms. It's probably the most overlooked part of proper setup. What do we see more times than not? The trail arm, in this case for a right-hander, that's the right arm. It gets too high, okay? What do I mean by that? If I were to put an alignment stake on my forearms, the alignment stake would be aiming way left. We need to neutralize and soften this right arm, okay? So now, if you put an alignment stake on my forearms, they would line up to my feet, hips, shoulders, forearms. So how do we get that trail arm in a better position? Most people have a right hand on the club that's too high or weak, and that gets that forearm too high. So I want you to think about, I'm just going to pull up my shirt so you can see my forearm. I want you to assume that you're kind of giving blood, okay? And how would you give blood? You would put your palm up so the pit or the back of that elbow is facing up, okay? Let's assume that our left hand is already on there properly. Now I'm giving blood, okay? I don't want to get this entire shoulder, bicep, forearm, hand involved. All I want to do is place the club and get the hand in a position so I didn't move any of this. This can work independent of this. That is not the way that we grip the club. This would be a no. This would be a yes. And when we do that, it really softens this right arm, okay? It actually puts just a little bit of a bend or a flex into that trail arm. And it gives us just a little bit of a tilt as well. So from a face-on view, this is a really good neutral setup position. If I get my right arm too involved, it pitches my shoulders to the left. My trail shoulder gets too high, and that's really going to cause some issues with our path later. So feel like you're giving blood, and then just rotate independent of the forearm and just put that right hand on the club. Boom. So now that we've got our hands on the club in a neutral fashion, we're setting up to the golf ball into a neutral fashion. Now we can think about starting to move the club, okay? And this is where the majority of you listening to my voice spend most of your effort, okay? Every golf professional has some preferences on what they like to see. My preferences as we start to move the club, and we're really only going to talk, we're going to divide my body in half, and we're only going to talk maybe how the club works as it's going back, which is the backswing, and a slight reverse of direction, which is the downswing. I want to talk about there are 3 45-degree angles in golf if we do this properly. The first 45 is when we set up to just the golf ball in a neutral position. My club shaft sits relative to the ground approximately at 45-degree angles, as you can see that there. If we get our hand position too high, now our hands are no longer resting comfortably right under my shoulder joints or my chin. So we don't want high hands where my hands are outside of my chin, okay? We want to just fall neutral. I could take a nap here, and this is where my hands would fall. If I'm way up like this and I took a nap, they would eventually fall here. So let's set up in a neutral position. Now we have the club on a 45-degree angle. What is the next 45-degree angle that we're trying to get to? At the top of the golf swing, if I do this properly, my club will set at a 45-degree angle approximately. So that's the second of the two 45-degree angles. The third would be post-impact. Once we get to this position, there's my club back on a 45-degree angle. If we can get to those 3 positions, that's going to be advantageous to where my misses go. All my job is to manage people's misses. We don't have to worry about good shots. We just have to manage the bad shots. So now, how do we make these 3 45-degree angles work together? When I set up to the golf ball, that's position 1, okay? A very important checkpoint is the first time that the club shaft becomes parallel to the ground, okay? From this angle, club shaft is parallel to the ground. What do we see most mistakes? First time club is parallel to the ground, the club head is too far behind my body line. A good checkpoint would be, I want to line up club head, hands, body line. So right there, that's where the club head should be. First time club reaches parallel. Now from there, all I want to do is take my lead arm to parallel. So now it's parallel to the line. I don't want this lead arm going too far behind me. I don't want the lead arm being too far out in front of me. I like to see that the hands almost lining up to my body line. Now, when we do this, we have to have some wrist conditions, and the wrist conditions would be just a little radial deviation. So we're going up and back, up and back. So there's P2. All we're going to do is rise to the top, and if you have a mirror or your cell phone, there's my 45-degree angle. Hopefully you can see that on camera. From there, I want to just travel back into impact, release the club, back over into a 45-degree angle on the opposite side of my body. Assuming we have a good grip, which we've talked about, assuming we have a good setup, which we've talked about, if we get in and out of the ground properly, which means we've managed our low point, we should have a golf ball that travels right down our center line. So probably the most difficult of those 345s would not be set up. This is relatively simple. And in my words, I call it kindergarten math. This second 45 is very difficult for people. What do we see the majority of the mistakes? The club gets way past the line. They get this flying elbow. They lose all good arm structure and club head structure. And then huge compensations have to be made in order to get down to the golf ball. Let's simplify this. What does a proper backswing look like? And I've said it many times. Golfers do too much of this and not enough of this. We need to feel like our arms work in this fashion in the backswing and not in this fashion. So you can do something at home. You could set up your camera exactly where I have this camera set up. It's kind of right on my toe line. You can use a mirror at home. In this case, I have a 7-iron. You can use like pitching wedge, 9-iron, 8-iron, 7-iron, okay? And let's help you get into that second 45. Now watch how simple this is. And this is just a drill, but it's a drill that is, the purpose behind the drill is to give you what good arm and wrist structure should do. So if from a setup position, all I do is lift my arms slightly and engage my wrists to where I hinge it to where that club is on a 45-degree angle, okay? And then I'm just going to move it to, as I look at it, it's on a 45-degree angle. So let's do this from this setup position, raise my arms, engage my wrists. Now it's at a 45. Now I'm just going to move it over. Now it's on a 45-degree angle as I look at it. Now this does not look like a backswing, does it? Now all I have to do is turn my body, boom. And now all of a sudden that arm structure, wrist structure puts that club in a beautiful position. So as I do it without the drill, the club should travel through P2 in that position. Boom. There's my P3 position, which is first time lead arm is parallel to the ground. That's where the club should be. How do we do that in a drill form? Proper setup. Raise the arms, engage the wrists slightly. Put it over on a 45 and then just turn the chest. Boom. Now we're done. That's all the backswing is. This is as far as we need to go. People over-rotate. They suck the arms inside and usually get past the line, which causes that chicken wing. Use your camera at home. Set it up and just see if you can just reach a 45-degree angle and be done with it. All right, so let's put a bow on this video. So today's video was all in an effort to get you more neutral. Grip, stance, posture, ball position, and alignment. Those are 5 key fundamentals that we need to get before we even learn to move the club away. Once we get those 5 fundamentals down, now let's just work on building a backswing. P2 position, P3 position, and then you're done. We've enjoyed putting these videos together. Keep the questions coming. We're going to continue to do this through the spring. Bradley and I are having a lot of fun doing this. So remember, keithleyboys@pga.com. Send your questions there, or comment below and drop a question. We'll do our best to try to answer them for you. So until then, see you next time.